Okay. Okay, I think if everybody's ready to go, let us know once we're ready to get rolling.
We're ready.
Okay. All right. Good morning, everyone. Good to see everybody. I think it's been a little while since our last meeting, so I hope everybody's had a great summer. We have a pretty packed agenda today in terms of discussion, in terms of issues that come up. Looking forward to it. I think there's some interesting things for us to consider. Why don't we get started with roll call? I'll just run through folks on the line. Grace Kung.
Here.
Jeremy Ding.
Here.
Ed Donnelly.
Here.
Stephanie Cow.
Here.
Lindsay Angelots.
Here.
And Lisa Watson is not here at the moment. At least it doesn't look like she's in chambers either. Okay.
No, she is not. We have not heard from her either.
Oh, there we go. Good morning, Lisa. We're just doing roll call.
Yes, here. I can hear you.
Perfect. Oh, okay, great. Hi, Lisa. All right, so we've got all commissioners present, and Council Member Primuth, Council Liaison is present. And then in terms of staff liaisons, it looks like Chief Zielinski, you're in chamber. Is Chief Riddle there?
I don't know if you could pick that up, but Chief Zaniston is here on behalf of Chief Riddle.
Okay. Good morning, Chief Zaniston. Okay. I think we can jump to agenda item 1, which is public comment, general public comment. I did see one that was circulated to us yesterday, and another I think that came in after the deadline. Is that right?
That is correct. So we do have one general public comment.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm echoing here. And that hello. Okay, sorry. So we do have one general public comment, and that is I've uploaded it onto the city website under agenda. So in case anyone wants to go ahead and read it, they are more than welcome to. And I emailed the commissioners last night as well.
Thank you. Okay. Are we going to have that be something that we just read ourselves?
Correct. Now, since we are fully open, people can actually come in and do their public comments.
Okay. I will note, I got an email reflecting another public comment that came in late. I can send that around to the folks on the commission so they can read that as well.
Are we talking about the gas station comment or another comment?
No, another comment. No, other than the gas station comment. That's right.
We do have another public comment that came in at, I think it's 8:21 p.m. So after the 6 o'clock deadline, that one would be going on the next agenda for October.
I see. Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay, so then next agenda item, minutes of the last meeting. I hope folks have had a chance to take a look. Any comments or suggestions or edits for those?
Can I ask a quick follow-up question about the public comment? Just in case anyone's watching, the public comment was with regard to the city considering prohibiting the sale of tobacco products. If that does move forward, is that going to come, which commission is that going to go through, if any? I guess my question is.
So if I could answer that, that was not supposed to be on this Public Safety Commission's agenda. That'll go at another time. It'll come before the Public Safety Commission. We're anticipating sometime mid-October, and you'll have an opportunity at that time to review it.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure because it sounds like it could be like a finance issue. Public health kind of falls under public safety, so I could see how it could impact multiple commissions. Cool, thank you.
Okay. Any comments on the minutes? All right. Do we have a motion?
I motion to approve the minutes as submitted.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Should we do a roll call vote? Commissioner Kung?
Aye or yes.
Commissioner Ding?
Yes.
Commissioner Donnelly?
Aye.
Commissioner Cow?
I'm going to abstain. I was absent from that meeting.
Okay. Commissioner Angelatz?
Aye.
And Commissioner Watson? Oh, Lisa, we didn't hear you. I think you're still muted.
Yes.
Okay, and I'll vote yes. So the motion passes. Minutes are approved. Okay. Next item on the agenda is Firearms Safe Storage Ordinance. I'll turn it over to Lieutenant Jacobs and Chief Selinsky.
If I could ask that the agenda be moved one item out of order. We have the city manager with us present today that would like to speak to the commission. And I know her time is valuable. So if I could have her come up first, and then we could take the next item after.
Absolutely.
And with that, I'd like to introduce Armine Chaparian, our city manager. And this is her first time here speaking to this group. So we welcome you and thank you for coming.
Good morning, Commission. Thank you for having me, Chief Selinsky, Commissioner Osseroff, and the rest of the commissioners. It's very nice to meet you all remotely. I look forward to meeting you in person. I hope we'll have opportunities to do that. I'm here this morning twofold. First and foremost, I just want to say good morning to all of you and introduce myself. I'm 3 months in with the city, very happy to be here, getting to know the community, the organization, and certainly looking forward to working with all of you and also getting to know the issues. In the short time I've been here, one of the things I've taken on is to work with all of the departments to gain a stronger understanding of our city's operations. And in doing so, I am working with department heads to do various assessments of their department. That being the case, this morning, I did have an item I wanted to share with all of you, which is that Chief Selinsky and I will be working together to launch a process to do an assessment of our police department. This is something many cities have taken on, and organizationally, this is something that could help me as the incoming city manager to have a better understanding of our operations. There are various resources available that we'd like to tap into, including the International City Managers Association, which has an avenue for us to post a request for qualifications, which is the way we'd like to do this. And in doing so, the scope, as we work with all of you to refine it, that would be one of the goals, to work with the Public Safety Commission as we launch this process to put together a scope of what we want to do as part of our assessment. My thought was to look at it from having an assessment done that looks at our organizational structure, our workload, overall efficiencies, our use of information technology, and a review working with our Public Safety Commission. I think an assessment like this would be very instrumental as our organization looks to continue enhancing our operations, especially in our police department, as we are doing in every other department. And I hope that in the next few months, we can work with you to come up with the parameters of our request for qualifications, which would be basically the document we would issue to various firms who do this kind of work. And at that point, my thought is we do this by the end of the year. Given the workload we already have, this is an extra basically project we'll be taking on. We can issue the RFQ by the end of the year, solicit responses, then hopefully bring an individual or a firm on board to help us do this, launching the process in the beginning of the year. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, the thought would be that Chief Selinsky works very closely with the Public Safety Commission as we're putting together our scope and our process for how we're going to do this. I think this would be a great undertaking for the city. I've done a similar assessment already for some departments, and there's a few that I'm starting to look at for the rest of the organization. And this would also be a great mechanism for keeping council in the process, letting them know operationally where we are at, and working with all of you to help continue improving everything we're doing in the organization. I just wanted to say hello. So I hope that's a good way to start off my relationship with all of you, and I can answer any specific questions you have. And Chief will make sure you all have my contact information. So if any of you would like to meet with me individually, or you just want to come by and say hello, I'm on the second floor in City Hall. I can open it up to any specific questions you may have.
I think that means you did a great job.
Okay, maybe I covered everything, or I haven't had enough coffee yet. Nice to meet all of you, and I certainly do look forward to meeting you in person. And if you ever want to stop by, please do so. I would welcome the opportunity. And I do want to also say thank you to all of you. As commissioners, I recognize that commissioners in the city of South Pasadena work 10 times harder than anywhere else. I do want to take a moment to thank you, because the work you're doing is priceless. It is a huge, huge undertaking. And I know in the next year, we're going to have a lot of things we're going to do together. The assessment being one of them. So I want to thank you in advance, because I know we're going to put you to work quite a bit. And I look forward to working with all of you. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for joining us and for that. And I am looking forward to that process. I think that'll be a really valuable process for everyone.
All right.
Okay.
We could now resume and go into the regular agenda, and that'll be item number 3, the Firearm Safe Storage Ordinance. Lieutenant Jacobs is here on behalf of the police department to present this to you.
Wow, that's a hard act to follow. I don't know if I've had as much caffeine yet, but I'll try and get through this. So good morning, commissioners. My name is Tom Jacobs. I'm a lieutenant with support services in the South Pasadena Police Department. Today, our discussion is going to revolve on the South Pasadena ordinance regarding safe storage of firearms in their residences. There are several California state laws regulating the storage and access to firearms. California Penal Code 25100 defines the crime of criminal storage of a firearm, and it reads, a person commits the crime of criminal storage of a firearm if all of the following conditions are satisfied. The person keeps any firearm within the premise that is under the person's custody and or control. Second, the person knows or reasonably knows that a child is likely to gain access to the firearm without the permission of the child's parents or legal guardian. The child obtains access to the firearm and thereby causes death or great bodily injury to the child or any other person. Now, in violation of this penal code, the person will more than likely be charged with a felony with up to 3 years in state prison. One thing about our state laws is they don't clearly define safe storage, and it does not apply to all homes, but instead to homes where children live and where a child is likely to gain access to a firearm. The South Pasadena Safe Storage of Firearms Ordinance would require all firearms in a residence to be securely stored in a locked container or disabled with a trigger lock. The ordinance would define a locked container as a secured container that is fully enclosed and locked. The ordinance would allow for many types of locked boxes, including those of quick access used with a padlock, a key, a push button, an RFID chip, or a biometric lock based on a person's fingerprint, as well as gun safes. Now, the ordinance would further exempt the homeowner who carried the firearm on his person or within close proximity and control that the owner can readily retrieve and use a firearm as if carried on his person. A violation of the ordinance would most likely be enforced after the fact, such as a firearm recovered after being used in a crime or by observation of police officers during a call to the residence on a report of an unrelated crime. A violation of this ordinance would result in a misdemeanor conviction of a fine not to exceed $1,000 or by imprisonment in the county jail not to exceed 6 months. And this would be for each violation. Now, looking across the state, other California cities have adopted similar ordinances. Excuse me, staff has conducted a brief survey of 6 California counties containing 17 cities, which each city representing a safe storage ordinance. A question's asked, has your department cited anyone for a violation of the ordinance? Or 2, did the district attorney file the case? The results of our survey were unanimous. Not one California agency has cited for a violation of the ordinance. The agency chose instead to use California Penal Code 25100 to cite violators. There were no cases filed by the district attorney's office under the city ordinances. The consensus of the agencies was to use the ordinance as an educational tool to inform the violator of the many options available to secure the firearm properly. Some of the agencies provided free trigger locks as furthering the education. I will mention the South Pasadena Police Department also provides free trigger locks. Now, researching this further, a check with the Alhambra District Attorney's Office, they said that under that type of ordinance, they would prosecute, but this would be on a case-by-case basis. And so today, the Public Safety Commission should consider 3 alternatives. 1, accept the draft ordinance and recommend the City Council review. 2, modify the draft ordinance. Or 3, choose not to move forward with a recommendation to the Council. Now, this ends my presentation, and I thank you for your time. But if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay,
I have a question.
Commissioner Donnelly?
Lieutenant, from a policing perspective, is there any downside to passing this ordinance?
I don't see any downside to it. I think the fact that one point I would have to stress is that police officers would be called to the location for an unrelated crime. In other words, I don't believe that we would move with the authority if a person visiting the house said, hey, that guy didn't store his gun properly. I need you to go cite him. I think in those cases, we would need district attorney approval on something like that because of the Fourth Amendment violations.
Okay, thank you.
I have a, go ahead. Oh, so in reading the ordinance, I have a couple questions. Under the prohibition section 3, I'm trying to imagine the scenario for keeping a firearm within close enough proximity and control that the owner or other lawfully authorized user of a firearm who is over the age of 18 can readily retrieve and use the firearm as if carried on the person. I get carrying a gun. What does this really mean, I guess? Does that mean like it's on my nightstand and while I'm sleeping, or does that mean it's on like my coffee table, with or without children? So I'm just trying to figure out what this within close enough proximity actually means. And I find the exemption somewhat confusing as far as a peace officer or member of the armed service or National Guard, and the child obtains the firearm during or incidental to the performance of a person's duties. So I'm not sure the real life scenario or case for either of those items.
Commissioner Ding, if I can answer that, that is consistent with what's in the penal code now. So there is some vagueness into what is readily available, but that is what the wording in the penal code is. And if the commission would like to recommend defining that further, we're certainly open to hearing that.
Yeah, and as Lieutenant Jacobs was reading it, I pulled it up on my computer and followed along the penal code. So I mean, just from I know we could do what ifs all day, but if I'm sitting on my couch and I have a loaded gun on my coffee table and I'm just a single male adult, no kids in the house, and somebody calls the cops, you guys come over and you see that there's just a loaded gun on my coffee table. Am I in violation? Because when I was watching TV, it probably fell within number 3. But now that I've answered the door and there's just a gun sitting on my coffee table. So I guess I'm just kind of confused about when that would actually be enforced, because it's not super clear to me. Obviously, if that same fact pattern happened and I have a 2-year-old running around, that's a whole different scenario. But I don't think it separates that. And as far as number 4, I guess I still just don't understand it if we can get additional context. So if I'm a peace officer and my kid obtains my gun incidental to the performance of my duties, I don't know what that means. So am I just fully exempt and my toddler can grab my gun and it's fine? Or what does that mean?
Sir, if you look further in the penal code under 25-135, some of the provisions that are mentioned in the ordinance are also in the penal code. This penal code is set up for homeowners that had weapons and had someone living, rooming, or staying with them, either a family member or someone that was not eligible to carry a firearm. Let's take, for example, a felon, or maybe someone with diminished capacities. In that regards, the penal code lays out very specifically storage and or the possibility that the gun is secured once it's on your person. I think when you look at number 3, sir, you do have to remember that within your own home, that's your home. And as a police officer, you are limited in our ability to enter your home and or to do things. Penal Code 25-100 was set up for those incidents you just talked about where a child got a hold of your gun. Then there are there are problems with that in having a gun on your person or uncontrolled and a child gets it. Now looking at number 4, remember that oftentimes as police officers, we enter into, let's just say, a domestic violence situation where we have 2 combatants, a husband and wife. Perhaps there are children involved and perhaps officers get involved. Is there a chance an officer could lose his weapon? Very real possibility. These are things that I think you have to leave in the realm of possibility and allow for the ordinance to be used in that effect. Again, it mirrors very much within 25-135. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that for number 4, that makes a lot of sense as far as an officer losing his firearm. But the way it's worded to me, it makes it seem like, and I assume the legal interpretation would also be that if a homeowner peace officer just leaves his gun on the coffee table, he would also be exempt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just say incidental to the performance of a person's duties, but that's super vague also. But that's all I have. I mean, I feel like I'm pretty satisfied with the examples that were provided.
Stephanie, go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you for the information, Lieutenant. It was really helpful. I just had a quick question. I know during your presentation, you mentioned that our city had surveyed a few other cities in coming up with this draft ordinance. I'm just wondering if one of those cities was San Francisco. And the reason I'm asking that is because if I recall correctly, San Francisco's safe storage ordinance had a Second Amendment constitutional violation claim brought against it. And also, if I remember correctly, I think it withstood the challenge. So I just wanted to make sure that whatever issue that San Francisco faced, if we've got a similar kind of drafting or language in our draft ordinance, that it mirrors as closely as we can, just so we can shield ourselves from possible constitutional claims as well.
I think you hit the nail on the head when you said that. No, actually, we haven't surveyed San Francisco. In San Francisco, Marin County, we contacted Belvedere, Orindo, Dublin, and Alameda police departments for their use. I think you bring up a very valid point on a Fourth Amendment issue, and those are things that would have to be, I think, revised within the ordinance itself. I think that we run the risk of, again, neighbor upon neighbor that may falsely accuse or may say something about, hey, that gun he doesn't store his gun, it's not locked up, and I need the police to check it out. I think we're walking a tenuous line when we use the authority of a city ordinance to push on the Fourth Amendment rights.
Okay, and then, sorry, just to clarify, I may have misspoken, but the San Francisco City Ordinance, I don't know if the challenge was a Fourth Amendment, but I do know that there was a Second Amendment challenge. So that might be something that you would want to double check as well. And it would have been in the Ninth Circuit, if that helps narrow the search. And I also think that LA City has a safe storage handgun ordinance. I don't know off the top of my head whether or not theirs has been challenged and has withstood challenge. So that might also be a good place to look. And that's all on my end. Thank you.
Okay.
We can certainly look into the LA City and San Francisco and make sure that we're consistent, that we close the loop on those potential liabilities.
Lindsay, did you have a comment?
No, just a comment and a note of appreciation to the department for bringing this forward as a major public health issue. I think you're probably aware, certainly, but firearm suicide for youth, in the U.S. Is a tremendous particular problem for mental health reasons, over 1,000. And gosh, I think the last 10 years, 90% of the firearm injuries for pediatrics worldwide are in the US. And then we have other children who are under 12 for whom firearms are mistaken for toys, often, which are in the news. So my question pertains to the educational aspect of this. What can we do to make sure that we promote the availability of safe storage, particularly if you're providing them for free to the community? Because it sounds like the overall goal here is to make sure we are changing behavior at the family level and providing some community education.
So when we promote a new ordinance, especially something like this, and I think you're exactly right, we're trying to change the behavior as opposed to penalize. We do a number of different things. We can certainly do educational campaigns through our schools, through our social media platforms, certainly with the help of this commission and council, and making sure that the entire community is not only aware of the ordinance, but then also dive a little bit deeper into the statistics, as you mentioned, and then the South Pasadena's program where we provide free gun safety, triggering disabled locks, safety kits, and whatnot. And we've done that for a number of years. It's been a very successful program. We partnered with ATF to provide those tools. So anybody that's watching or hearing this, if they want one, all they have to do is come to the police department and we'll provide one free.
Thank you.
I think I would echo, sorry, I have a quick comment. I think I would echo Jeremy's concern, or maybe provision 3 in terms of the prohibition, to me seems a bit vague and might benefit from further clarification. I sort of I understand, I think, where this is coming from, but it's just, as written, just doesn't seem, and I understand, the penal code has certain language in it. I think maybe what would be helpful is to see some of the legislative history, perhaps, if there's more sort of like background to what brought about this language. But I think, to me, it would be useful to sort of nail that down a little bit more, because it's a little bit vague, and I think it might create a little bit of confusion.
Yeah, I think what helped me and what I've seen before also is like, if my brother-in-law is a felon, but he lives in my extra bedroom or something, that I think what this means is I can't leave my gun in his bedroom. I can leave it in my own bedroom and make sure that he or doesn't have access to it. And I guess that kind of helped me clarify it, but I feel like anyone else reading this will probably have the same head scratching that you and I initially had.
Right.
I think an alternative way that could be helpful too is I know the lieutenant brought up a subsequent penal code section that may have helped clarify it. And this is obviously something that you would need to take back to legal, but perhaps at least in that section 3, perhaps you can just reference that penal code section and then just make sure you add in as amended on whatever date it's been amended. So if it subsequently gets changed, it still refers back to the original language that you intended. And then perhaps during the police department's educational process and outreach, you can provide examples. If I don't think that would necessarily be well suited in an ordinance, but to just help clarify and provide the public guidance, that might be one way to help further clarify this number 3.
I think that's a great idea. It does bring up a question of sort of broader question, and I can admit I have not done the research on this. So if I'm wrong about this, let me know. But if the penal code, if the state penal code has provisions that address this issue, does our ordinance do anything different from what's already required under the penal code?
Yes, in regards to Penal Code 25-135, that's specifically for a person living in your home considered an adult. The ordinance itself would narrow those parameters to all residences within South Pasadena. That would mean every single residence would be affected by this ordinance to have safe storage. So that's where the parameters are wider for the ordinance, is that it includes all people, not just people with kids, not just people with felons or diminished capabilities with a person living there, but this would be all residences. So every single person in South Pass who owns a firearm would have to have it locked up or on their person.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, is there any further discussion or questions?
So it looks like the motion on this one, if I'm hearing my fellow commission members correctly, is probably a motion to direct staff to go back and look into the issues that we discussed today and come back to the commission at a future date with revised language to the ordinance. So I'll go ahead and make that motion and see if I've captured my commissioner's kind of intent correctly.
Stephanie, yeah, when I first saw this ordinance, the very first thing I thought was, doesn't the state already have safe storage laws? So we have a bunch of whereas kind of paragraphs up top. I think just for public consumption, it might be useful to provide a little bit of background saying, whereas the state law only applies in certain situations currently, to kind of explain why we're doing this, because the first thing that I said was, doesn't the state already have this? But I will second your motion, Stephanie.
Okay, with that motion, should we go, let's do a roll call vote. Commissioner Cow?
Yes.
Commissioner Angelatz?
Yes.
Commissioner Watson?
Yes.
Commissioner Kung?
Yes.
Commissioner Ding?
Yes.
Commissioner Donnelly?
Yes.
And I will vote yes as well. So that motion passes unanimously.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Next item on our agenda is the unarmed traffic enforcement. Our subcommittee of Commissioner Donnelly and Commissioner Watson spent a good amount of time and effort on this, and looking forward to your presentation. So I'll turn it over to you both.
Thank you. So Commissioner Watson and I spent a considerable amount of time looking into the possibility of utilizing unarmed traffic enforcement here in South Pasadena. Lisa, I think, is it okay if I present an overview of our work and our findings, but please jump in at any time if I miss something?
Perfect. Thanks, Ed.
Okay. So the goal of unarmed traffic enforcement, as we have researched it, is to provide more equity in the way that officers are enforcing traffic laws. Statistics have shown that during daylight hours, people of color are disproportionately pulled over in the state of California. We don't have specific data about South Pasadena because of the current way that those stops are processed, but I'll discuss the moving forward in the future in a moment. In 2015, the California legislature passed AB 953, which is the Racial and Identity Profiling Act, which was specifically to collect data and analyze it in regards to race and ethnicity during traffic enforcement stops. And it includes an oversight board that is providing reports on an annual basis. The larger communities and law enforcement agencies in the state came on board first. I believe it was in 2018 they began reporting, and then over the course of 5 years it kind of cascades down to the smaller agencies like South Pasadena. So in 2023 we're required to start reporting. Currently the South Pasadena Police Department is implementing a new computer assisted dispatch program, which we've discussed previously. As this comes online, it will allow for us to be able to parse apart the data after each traffic stop, so that not only can it be reported to the RIPA program, but also we can use it locally for our own analysis. With that as the goal, Commissioner Watson and I looked at 3 different approaches to unarmed traffic enforcement. And the first thing that we did was we looked nationally and could not find a formal program that is in place right now. However, we did find 3 that were proposed: one in Berkeley, California, one in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and one in Philadelphia. So we contacted, we took a 2-prong approach, and from the subcommittee, we approached the municipalities themselves, and then we asked Chief Zielinski to have his staff approach on an agency-to-agency basis with the police departments in those cities to discuss how these programs were being implemented or planned for. And in brief, what we found was, in the case of Berkeley and Cambridge, Massachusetts, as they proposed local ordinances, they quickly ran into issues with the state penal code, which precludes non-sworn officers from issuing citations. So after discussions with the city council in Cambridge by email, Zoom calls, phone calls, they've essentially abandoned that program and are redirecting their efforts into a cahoots model of dealing with mental health, addiction, and homelessness to draw down from police resources, rather than trying to implement a unarmed traffic enforcement program that could lead to litigation or issues with the state penal code. The City of Philadelphia's city manager's office did not respond to us, but from the agency-to-agency contact, it seems that there's been no motion there to move forward to implement this in Philadelphia either. So seeing as that there was no active unarmed traffic enforcement programs being implemented or at least planned for, we looked to other similar type programs, and one being in New Orleans. I want to get the name right. So in New Orleans, they've contracted a company called On Scene Services to handle non-injury, non-criminal accident investigations. So when a call comes into 911 for a traffic accident where there's no one hurt or it's not part of a crime, this private company goes out and conducts the investigation and they turn that over to both the police and to insurance companies. And the insurance companies compensate the company for their work. So it's not a public expense. This is the only sort of program we could find like that where a private company was doing investigations on behalf of the police. But in any instance where those investigators show up on site and find evidence of a crime, it immediately gets turned over to the police anyway. So it's a fairly limited program. The next thing we looked at was we contacted the UK Highways Agency. They have a uniformed patrol called traffic officers that are in marked vehicles on the roads in the UK, throughout the UK, and they provide no traffic or legal enforcement. They're there simply to provide for accident recovery, to keep traffic flow moving forward, both on a daily basis and for large events like they cited the Olympics in London. So despite the fact that on the face of it, they seem to be traffic enforcement officers, what they really are is traffic flow officers. And then the third place that we reached out to was New Zealand, that had a long history of unarmed traffic enforcement, dating back to the founding of the nation. And what we found in New Zealand was that about 30 years ago, they actually ended that program due to the danger posed to the officers who were making traffic stops. In the course of the police force, the national police force in New Zealand, of all of the officers who were killed in the line of duty, 31% had made a traffic stop. And that include both armed and unarmed officers. So they ended that program due specifically to the danger posed to someone who is making a traffic stop. So having looked at local or at least American-based programs, and then looking overseas for examples as well, and not finding much, we looked at other opportunities or other approaches, and that was mostly technology-driven, which came down to cameras, red light cameras or speed cameras. In the state of California, red light cameras are legal. However, they are essentially unused because the citations are unenforceable. When a ticket is mailed to someone, there's no repercussion if they don't pay it because it's not issued by a sworn officer. And then on the opposite side, speed cameras are not legal in the state of California currently. The ACLU has threatened that on the basis of privacy, that they would immediately litigate against any community that tries to implement them. That said, currently there are two bills in the state legislature, which are SB 735 and AB 550, which propose the use of speed cameras in specific locations, especially adjacent to schools. So there is a possibility that that may open up the use of speed cameras here in South Pasadena, but it also could immediately trigger litigation from the ACLU. And also police unions have expressed opposition to these as well. So that's a brief overview of the research we did into this. And so what we've boiled down as our findings. Lisa, did I miss anything?
No, I think that's a great review. I would say just besides doing interviews, we also did like a literature review, but that's the only thing I would just add.
Yeah, that's correct. And I believe as our attachments, we may have included our bibliography. If not, we can provide that to anyone who is curious. We did include a lot of the text of not just the new legislation, but also transcripts from some of the meetings in the other municipalities. And while it is a fairly large amount of reading, I think it's comprehensive into what we found. At this time, what we're recommending is that because of California Penal Code Section 830, that a non-sworn officer cannot issue a citation, that it's really not possible to implement this sort of program without repercussions. So we would say that it's just moot until such time that state law has changed. In the meantime, we recommend that we do survey the 3 municipalities that have proposed this to find out if they were to implement an unarmed traffic enforcement squad without a change to the penal code, how would they do that? What repercussions did they face? Is it practical? And then also we should look at the outcomes of the legislation regarding speed cameras. And if it passes, consider if there is a practical application here in South Pasadena. And then most importantly, to achieve the goal, which is equitable, equitable stops with traffic enforcement during daylight. Really, the most practical way to achieve that goal is training. Chief Zielinski has provided a list of the training that's happened in the past 18 or so months, and we recommend that that be ongoing and surveyed to be sure that they keep up in a timely manner, so that when officers are interacting with the public during traffic enforcement, that it is done in a way that is just and fair. And then lastly, as the new computer-assisted dispatch system comes online and we do have data, local data, we would recommend that the Public Safety Commission and City Council on an annual basis review that data to learn how our officers are interacting with the public and to see if there's room for improvement. And that's a brief and hopefully but comprehensive look at the work that we've done. I think Lisa and I would be glad to answer any questions. And as I mentioned in the attachments, there's an awful lot of data that can be reviewed too for anyone who's curious.
Thank you, Ed. And I would just add one thing. If the penal code was able to change and we were able to move forward on this, it would have a fiscal impact of adding more officers, because at this point, an officer who's doing a traffic stop could be pulled to any other issues that are occurring. We don't have separate officers just for traffic stops. So that would be the other thing that I would mention. So you could be doing a traffic stop and get a robbery call, for example.
Yeah, it would be an expansion of the police force for sure. And that would be, have a fiscal impact for the city.
Thank you, Ed and Lisa, for all the effort that you guys went through. And I think I didn't see the bibliography, but what you did attach to the report is extensive and fairly comprehensive. But I did have a question, and this might have been addressed in the case, but maybe you read more with respect to red light cameras. Has there been any analysis or discussion on how that has impacted these other sort of equitable issues? I know obviously objectively, it makes no discrimination obviously in terms of red light, but having that in place, has that impacted, those, because my understanding is that, you can have red light cameras in place, but that doesn't mean that the police force is not still doing traffic stops. So has there been a noticeable sort of impact on that front analyzed?
Yeah, I don't know that we looked at it from that perspective. What we did learn was that it's an adjunct to traffic enforcement, not a replacement for it. So it hopefully would, if you see a red light camera, it would preclude you from running a red light. It doesn't stop anyone from running a red light. All it does is penalize them after the fact. And there was, in the 10 or I think it was in 2012, so about 10 years ago, many of the municipalities that had the red light cameras in place turned them off because it was unenforceable, including the city of Los Angeles. So it is something that could be done. Whether it's effective or could be seen by the public as a cash grab rather than an actual public safety move is another consideration. But it is something that's in the arsenal that could be included for with additional traffic enforcement, but it certainly is not a program that works on its own. And I would assume speed cameras are similar in that way as well.
Okay, go ahead, Stephanie.
Yeah, I don't have any questions, but I just wanted to thank both Commissioner Donnelly and Commissioner Watson. It's obvious that you put in a lot of time and effort on this issue. Thank you for the really good summary that you just gave us, as well as providing us all the backup documentation. We really appreciate it.
Sure.
I think in terms of process and procedure, we simply don't take action, right? I think in this situation, let's, we'll perhaps continue to monitor per your recommendations, the legislation that's going through, and see if there's a time to revisit this perhaps. But in terms of action, I don't think we need to take any formal action at this point, unless somebody else has another view on it.
Chair, I would recommend that the commission take action on a recommendation to council, and then we'll bring this to council with your recommendations, and they'll make the ultimate decision at this point. And then that's certainly not to say that we couldn't go back and revisit it as Commissioner Donnelly and Commissioner Watson had recommended.
Okay, so in terms of recommendation, we're saying a recommendation not to move forward with an unarmed traffic enforcement program.
That is correct. And then should that pass, we will take that recommendation and this report to council.
That makes sense. Okay. Do we have a motion?
Sorry, just to clarify before we make the motion, Commissioner Donnelly and Watson, was there also a recommendation from you for that annual review, or was that only later on in the future that you would want us to consider that?
It would depend a little bit on when that computer assisted dispatch program is up and running, and from our discussions with Chief Zielinski, he thinks that they'll be able to provide data prior to the RIPA requirement in 2023. So I think it's a little bit dependent on when the department has confidence that that's working the way it's supposed to. And I would say that would be the time that you start data collection. But to get a really accurate picture, you're probably looking at an annual review.
If I could add one more thing, it's our intent, as Commissioner Donnelly mentioned, that computer-aided dispatch system is really vital to providing accurate data, but it's our intent to include that in our annual report that comes out each year. I know there are different times this last year with COVID and a number of other different things, we were delayed on that, but it is our intent to include that with all the racial bias information, the complaints, traffic enforcement in a comprehensive and complete package. So that comes out to, and that report would come to the commission and council and be made available to the public as well.
Okay, thank you.
Great work, Lisa, and very comprehensive, lots of attachments. I was looking through them, and it's really good work. I just wanted to kind of frame this discussion per my own personal view and see if that's kind of what the commission feels. But I feel like some of these other cities, they approach the topic of unarmed traffic enforcement like, how do we reach the goal of unarmed traffic enforcement? I think for this commission, we kind of set out to kind of study and learn about it and determine if unarmed traffic enforcement is right for South Pasadena and is right for our department and our community. So I just kind of want to put that out there, in that I feel like some of these discussions going on out in the community or out in these other cities may be more framed like, how do we meet the goal of one day having unarmed traffic enforcement, where from my personal perspective, it should be, is unarmed traffic enforcement right for us?
Yeah, and I think, Commissioner Ding, I think that is inherent in the way that we approach this as a research project, rather than just a determination of how to do it.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that there was any type of bias or lean in the research you've done. I was just trying to kind of broaden the scope of discussions in the community or just in general.
Yeah, and from our discussions, in particular with the council members in Cambridge, Massachusetts, is that they they were definitely trying to get to that goal, you know, in some way, because they felt that that was the best way to achieve less bias in traffic enforcement. And it also, in some cases, was a way to redirect public funds from policing to public works by shifting those responsibilities. So there was, you know, when we were looking at it, we were looking at it from a perspective of, does this make sense for us? But they're definitely coming at it from a goal-driven way to get to the end.
Yeah, I mean, there's ways to do it that don't make sense or financial sense. So, but yeah.
For instance, you could just do it and then violate the penal code and then suffer the consequences.
I mean, you can even do it without violating the penal code. You have sworn officers not carry guns. You'll run into a lot of union issues, and resource issues and financial issues. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying. It's possible, but I don't know that that's our goal.
No, and I think Commissioner Watson and I, like I said, looked at it from a very practical perspective. You know, we want to be thoughtful about how we looked at it, but it had to be practical. And at this point, the practicality just isn't there.
Well, thank you. Great work.
Okay, do we have any further comment on this issue before we go to a motion? Okay, do we have a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion. I'll motion that at this time, the South Pasadena City Council and South Pasadena Police Department do not consider implementing unarmed traffic enforcement.
I'm sorry, before we take a roll call and a motion, I'd just like to note that there are no public comments related to this issue.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you, Chief. Okay, with that motion on the table, do we have a second? Okay, Grace, looks like you're second. Okay.
Yes, I'll second.
All right, let's do a roll call vote. Commissioner Cow?
Yes.
Commissioner Angelots?
Yes.
Commissioner Watson?
Yes.
Commissioner Kung?
Yes.
Commissioner Ding?
Yes.
Commissioner Donnelly?
Yes.
And I will vote yes as well, so that motion passes unanimously. Okay. The next item on our agenda is school safety. And I'll turn that over. Chief, is that your?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start this off. This was a carryover from the August meeting, which was prior to the start of the school year. There were some concerns, certainly, as we began the new school year, with a lot of students returning back from the long COVID break, looking at school safety in a very holistic point of view. And the police department certainly takes that viewpoint and takes it seriously. So since the beginning of school, we've provided additional patrols at all the schools, traffic enforcement, heavy extra presence in and around the schools, both during the times when children would walk to school, as school's beginning, and then as school lets out. So our efforts, at least in the start of the school year, have been a high visual presence along with an educational component, more driven from an educational side as opposed to an enforcement side. But as we transition and the year is kicking off, that model will start to change to the enforcement side of it as parents become aware of expectations and laws and the increased number of children. So again, this was more of a discussion to hear what the commission thought, what they've seen over the last month or so. And certainly with Commissioner Kung and her connection with the schools, if she had any additional information to add that might be helpful in the way we approach this.
I just want to say we do appreciate your presence there. I think it's just for everybody, just to get back into what traffic safety is like, knowing there's students crossing, bicyclists, everything out there. I know we've had questions through the schools and PTAs regarding, can parent volunteers come out and help with traffic, you know, like having the cars move along. There's just, I guess, different concerns going around about their safety, of course, outside of school, going to school. There was a question, I don't know if you can answer, do we still have a school safety resource officer?
We do have a school liaison officer.
Okay.
He's not assigned to any specific school, nor does he have an office at the school, but he is available as a liaison between the police department and the school, and he will handle any calls that may be related to that. Now, if it's a traffic related issue, we do have a traffic unit that will respond and handle any of those issues.
Okay, that sounds good. No, but so far it seems well received, I would say. I think everyone appreciates having everyone out there. I think there are times where you'll still see some craziness where, you know, cars go apart and a child runs out or back and forth. So things like that will seem to continue unless, you know, maybe they get a ticket or something, hopefully not worse happens. So hopefully the word is still out there to keep in mind, you know, it's okay to be a little late to school than to break some traffic rules just to, you know, drive through and get your kids at school. And I think we do try to enforce the message of, you know, allowing children to walk to school just to line up the traffic that goes around in all the major areas. I think it's been a while since we had full traffic with all the students back in school, a majority. It's a big majority of school back in person. So I just, hopefully everyone will take this as a reminder to stop at those stop signs, stop at those red lights and look for the students crossing. And hopefully I think the students will also be remembering their bicycle safety rules and pedestrian rules, and always letting all the kids to have eye contact with many of those drivers too. So, so far I think it's been going well because I haven't heard anything out there. And I appreciate also the crossing guards too that you guys are providing. And that's been very helpful as well. Thank you.
I will say for the first month, the police department has heard from a number of different community members, and it's all related to traffic enforcement. And when I talk about traffic enforcement, I use that synonymously with bicycle safety and pedestrian crossing. And so the city takes a pretty comprehensive look at that. We work with our MTIC commission, as all of you know, the Mobility Transportation Infrastructure Commission. They're looking at the engineering side of it. When the police department focuses on traffic enforcement, there's really what we call the 3 E's. It's education, enforcement, and engineering. And we certainly couldn't do it without our public works and as I mentioned, the MTIC commission. So when there is a problem that's brought before us, we take a very holistic approach and look at it. What we do want to be careful is that we don't come up with a solution or a fix that may remedy the situation yet push a problem out. It's like a balloon. If you push in one side, it's bound to pop out somewhere else. So we try to take a very comprehensive look at it and come up with long-term solutions using all our available resources. But traffic so far has been the number one concern. So you will see officers continuing to be out there. Again, a heavy presence both from the patrol side as well as the traffic enforcement units. Commissioner Donnelly.
Chief, in having a conversation with the president of the PTSA at the high school and discussing traffic safety, the only thing that he seemed to identify as a concern was the speed of cars on Meridian. And I know we have the new stop sign at Oak and Meridian, but in terms of how students were getting to and from the high school, that was the only spot he thought that there, might be something to watch for. And I'm sure your team is on it, but I did want to point that out.
Absolutely. I'll let the traffic unit know. We can do a number of different things to help remedy that, from extra enforcement to our mobile speed signs. So we will certainly take note and address that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll just add that as the liaison to the MTIC Commission, I know they're continuing to look at Meridian Avenue further south, but they haven't walked away from all the other issues on Meridian. And so, you know, that's one I think they should add to the list. You know, there's all kinds of traffic calming measures that people are looking at, and that might be something that can be done for that segment of Meridian. And then I will say that there was a study, traffic study that came out on high school drop-off about 1.5 years ago that showed a significant number of drop-offs on Rollin in the red zone. There was some concern about students sort of running across the streets at the high school. And I'd always intended to talk to the principal about that, but if that is something that's on the city's radar. And so, you know, at some point the city may, they've got a number of other issues to address, but at some point they might address that with the high school.
Hey, Chief, I had a question about school safety. Pre-COVID, I know that, you know, we had a detective assigned as the school resource officer. Now it sounds like we have a school liaison officer. I guess what was the impetus for that change? Is there additional context to it? I know that some people were calling for the elimination of the SRO. I mean, just wondering if that was a request from the district or council or something that was internal.
No, that was an internal decision. When we looked at changing the name, it was really more of what the roles and responsibilities are. So when we look at a school resource officer, traditionally, if you look at other communities, a school resource officer may have an office on campus and solely assigned to that campus, or maybe one or two others, depending on the size and location number of students. South Pasadena has never had an officer who reports directly to the school. It's always been an ancillary duty, to where it was one of our juvenile detectives that was assigned to the station and then would make periodic visits to the schools. So that certainly hasn't changed, but rather we've changed the name to fit more of the responsibilities that they do.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we are new parents at Marengo, and I want to give a wholehearted shout out to the crossing guards, especially the ones, and there's a primary one at Marengo and Monterey. Folks going through that intersection are not patient. And it's a lot of work. I think the woman's name is Algeria, who is primarily at that intersection, and she does a lot of work to make sure that folks get through there safely. So thank you very much to them and to the folks at the police department who fill in and who handle some of the other areas, because it's a critical issue, a critical role that they play in terms of our safety and our children's safety. So thank you to them. Any other comments or input on this agenda item? Okay, I think we can move on then to communications. Let's start with City Council Liaison Communications.
Thank you, everyone. We have, we're looking at our annual audit that has come through. It's it used to be called the CAFR. It's now pronounced something else. So the city has really accelerated its ability to report and understand and get the audit in place on time to understand its financial situation. So I give a lot of credit to Interim City Manager Elaine Aguilar and her team in the Finance Department for moving that along. There's a Finance Commission that has been invaluable. And then there's an ad hoc Finance Commission that has also provided help. So, that's something that's a really bright mark in the last year, or probably 9 to 10 months. We also are, we have enacted an ordinance that will ban gas-powered leaf blowers effective next year in the fall. There's an educational and outreach program. We think that there are programs that landscapers can use to subsidize and exchange and obtain the right equipment for battery operated leaf blowers. I think that's going to be a major improvement. A lot of people have told me those leaf blowers are the bane of their existence because they shatter their peace when they're trying to work at home. There's a number of other issues going on. I'll take any questions if you have them. Otherwise, that's my report.
Thank you, Councilmember Primith. Subject to any questions for him, let's move to staff liaison communications. Chief Dennison.
Good morning and thank you. Chief Riddle had nothing to report. Obviously, COVID numbers are going down, so that's the good news in the county right now. And no significant spikes in the city. Looking at recent response data, that we're not showing any responses related to COVID response. That's what I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Chief Zielinski.
Well, considering everything we've talked about today, I think that was quite a bit for the police department, but I would like to add a couple of other things. On October 11th, we'll be starting our Citizens Police Academy that runs October 11th through November 22nd. It'll be held on Monday evenings from 6 to 8:30 p.m. And that'll be here at the police department at one of our facilities here. And that is open to all South Pasadena residents that are 18 and older. And it is designed to give our community a better sense of what the roles of the police are in the community, what our daily responses are, maybe a little bit about how we do our jobs. So I encourage anyone that's interested. It's a lot of fun. I've talked to some of the other graduates over the last couple of years, and they've really enjoyed it. I've got some that are wanting to come back and do it again. So I encourage anyone that's interested, please go on our website. There's a flyer and contact information there. And we're looking forward to having it. Also, I wanted to introduce, for some time, we've been looking for a management analyst in the police department, and I wanted to introduce our newest hire, Allison. Allison is sitting here in front of us, Allison Worley. She have been a tremendous help in the month that she's been here, and a number of you will get the opportunity to meet her shortly. She'll be presenting staff reports and working with the commission on a variety of different topics and issues. You may see her out in the community. So I wanted to just welcome her and introduce her to you as well. And that's all I have from the police department.
Okay, thanks, Chief, and welcome, Allison. Let's jump into Commissioner Communications. Commissioner Angelat, why don't we get started with you?
No report, but echoing the incredible appreciation for Commissioners Watson and Donnelly. That was one of the more comprehensive domestic and international literature reviews I think that's come before this group. And I know we all feel exceptionally strongly about keeping this a safe and just city. So I'm really grateful.
Great. Commissioner Watson.
No additions to report. Thank you so much. And thanks to Commissioner Donnelly for his support in this project. I really appreciate it.
All right, Commissioner Kung.
Hello, good morning. Well, since our last update, it's kind of funny, school ended. Well, now school has started up again. Began a little over 4 weeks ago on Thursday, August 12th. It is in person, but there was an option for independent study version for especially those with health issues, or if that's their choice. Masks are required indoors at all campuses. But the kids, I feel like, been really positive, going back to school, very happy to see everyone in person. I think they've gotten used to all the mitigations that were put in place, the social distancing, the mask, the hand washing, the hand sanitizing. And so far, if people didn't realize there is a COVID dashboard from all the school districts. It's all on their school website. And so we have about a dozen positive cases since, throughout this entire time. So far, I haven't heard of any of them. I don't believe any of them were transmitted at school. They just were tested and will report if there is a positive case, and they have a procedure that they go through if a student was in very close contact to the person who tested positive for either faculty or students, and families would be informed. And depending if you're vaccinated or not vaccinated, there's like different protocols on what happens. School or district provides weekly COVID testing for their staff and students, so they can come by, register the Friday before, and the testing's on a Tuesday afternoon every week. They are considering future vaccination clinics. There was one over the summer, and hopefully they'll, are coordinating to do another one, because having people vaccinated is probably our #1 defense against the pandemic. I've also expanded social emotional resources, which have been given out to all the families through now. They communicate through a parent square, which so far has about 98% of reaching out to everybody. So anyone that's not getting messages, they can still reach out to their school for more information. So far, so good. School is trying to be as normal as possible, with a few exceptions, of course, with the safety measures, the mask, and there have not been many in-person group activities, gatherings, especially with adults or families out there. So we're hoping that, if everyone can get vaccinated, we could, come back to school completely safely and move on from there. But right now, it seems like we're doing well. Thank you.
Thanks, Grace. Commissioner Ding.
I don't have anything. It was good seeing everyone again.
All right, Commissioner Donnelly.
Well, I feel like I spoke an awful lot more than usual today, so I'll just leave it at that. Good to see everyone.
All right, it is good to see everyone. Commissioner Cow.
Nothing else to add. Good to see everybody.
Okay, yeah, great to see everyone. Hopefully we will, I'm not sure what this will look like next time, but I think this hybrid version works. I know folks are there's still obviously COVID concern going around. I think, I won't be shy about it. This is my preference, but I know that there are powers that exist beyond me that make these decisions. But I do appreciate that the city transitioned to or back to a hybrid or allowed the virtual option for us. And I think it's effective as well, frankly. I don't know that we're losing a whole lot, and especially if members of the public are permitted to come and present live. So with that, I don't really have anything more to add, but
Chair, if I could mention one thing, just yes. for housekeeping, the next Public Safety Commission is scheduled for October 11th, which is a holiday. So we will be canceling that meeting and rescheduling. It looks like we're going to reschedule for the 18th, the week following.
All right, thank you, Chief, for mentioning that. So unless anyone else has any further comments, I will look forward to seeing you all on the 18th of October. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Good. Thank you, everyone.